Welcome back to The Climb. We've covered retirement basics like estimating retirement income needs. We discussed key accounts, Social Security, 401ks, and others. Then we took it up a notch with intermediate concepts like maximizing contributions, catch-up rules, employer matching, and age-based allocations. Today, we go advanced, the withdrawal phase, how to make your nest egg last 30 plus years, and avoiding big mistakes like sequence of returns risk, tax-efficient drawdown strategies that really work, and planning for longevity and healthcare. This is where good planning turns into saving and lifelong security. From previous episodes, we talked about targeting 20 to 30 times annual expenses, max contributions and matches, asset allocation shifts that come along with age. Now the real challenge, spending it down without running out. How do you really take out the max of your retirement accounts without running out in your later years? In 2026, people retire with more in their accounts, but face higher longevity and cost of living. One bad sequence of return or market return risk earlier in retirement can cut decades off of your money. Advanced planning protects against that. So let's get ready to dive into this. Let's start the climb.
Life is full of choices, but how do all these choices connect? And how do we plan for what matters most? Because when your life goals align with the right financial strategy, you don't just dream, you climb.
The 4% rule. It's a safe starting point. Withdraw 4% of your portfolio in year one of retirement, adjusted for inflation each and every year. Historically, this lasts about 30 years in most scenarios, but it's not perfect. Always look at where things are heading, where the economy is, where your expenses are, and adjust based on what? Market conditions at retirement, your risk tolerance, and your spending flexibility. What are the alternatives? What is a different way of doing this? Because that's one very simple, basic way to determine how much to withdraw. Effective, however, like I said, typically lasts 30 years. But what are the alternatives? Well, there's a dynamic withdrawal strategy, and this adjusts based on your portfolio performance. So, for example, when the market has good years, or your portfolio has good years, you can withdraw 5% as a threshold. But in bad years, you reduce what you withdraw. Maybe you withdraw only 3%. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But the point being is you adjust your distributions of withdrawals based on your account performance. And then we have guardrails. So a floor and ceiling on withdrawals. What is the maximum you want to withdraw? So that's your ceiling, right? I won't withdraw more than 8%, 9%, 10%. But I won't withdraw less than 3%, 2%. So you give yourself bandwidth, and then you just monitor your performance, the markets, and you withdraw accordingly. Now here's another object, the bucket strategy. Short-term / cash bonds for 3 to 5 years. In other words, not all your money is invested in the market or not an aggressive strategy in the market. You have 3 to 5 years in reserves or in low-risk strategies so that if you need to withdraw more than your floor, you have an extra threshold or reserve. You want to take into consideration midterm balances and your long-term growth. You can test this with a Monte Carlo simulator on tools like Vanguard or Fidelity to see how these withdrawals hold up. In fact, what did we talk about in episode 3? We talked about the importance of financial planning. One of the things that we do in financial planning is we take in consideration withdrawals and distributions in the future. So again, work with your advisor. And if you don't have an advisor, either hire one or find tools that help you stimulate income retirement planning. Okay. Now, what are the goals? Sustainable spending that matches your lifestyle. We may adjust the way we spend when we retire, right? So consider this. Some people, when they retire, they want to travel the world. They want to buy an RV. They want to buy a vacation home. They want to do things with their children and grandchildren. Well, that means you're likely going to spend more than when you were working. If that's the case, make sure that you have the appropriate bucket and safety nest for that. But some people are different, right? Some people work longer, or when they retire, they're tired and they want to do less. Well, that may mean that you have to spend less at your retirement ages. You might be okay with having less income revenue coming into your pocket because your lifestyle has changed. So always really sit down and ask yourself, what is the quality of life and the lifestyle that you want to live in your golden years? The biggest danger in early retirement is bad market returns, especially right after you start withdrawing, which is sequence of return risk. Poor returns early on depreciate your principal faster. Here's an example. If you have a $1 million portfolio and you withdraw 4%, that's $40,000 in year one. But if the market drops 20% in that first year, your portfolio falls not just by $40,000, it falls to $760,000. Now this withdrawal hurts more. What are the mitigating strategies? So how do you avoid this, or how can you manage this? Well, again, you keep 2 to 3 years of expenses in cash and bonds. You delay big spending in down markets, right? You have flexible spending, so you may cut down discretionary spending in bad years, and you diversify globally across other assets. So, in other words, maybe you don't have all your retirement account in U.S. equities and bonds. You may have them in emerging markets or international markets or sectors that have inverse correlation with the majority of your funds. The idea is that you can reduce risk, volatility, drawdown exposure by the way you diversify your retirement account. And then rebalance to buy low and sell high. Always remember that we need to also know how to take earnings, how to take profits, right? A lot of people make the mistake that my position has done so well, this is never going to stop rising, so I just hold, and maybe the market starts correcting itself and I miss an opportunity to sell high. Same thing in the opposite, right? If the market has a drawdown, well, why is it having a drawdown? Is it because it's a bad position, or is it because the market is reacting to something that's happening either around the world or the United States or the news of the day, and then it becomes a buying opportunity? So rebalance accordingly, take a look at these factors, and make decisions. When is it time to buy? When is it time to sell? Great tool to provide you guaranteed income, especially during retirement. Some annuities have some like guaranteed death benefits or other riders. But just make sure you have a conversation with your advisor, insurance specialist, to discuss these products, because like any product, it has trade-offs, right? There are limitations. There's different types of annuities. There's fixed annuities. There's variable annuities. There's index annuities. There's you name it. I mean, it's a really ample field, and annuities do have a space in retirement planning, but it's not for everyone, especially when liquidity is a big factor for you. Okay. Another option to explore is cover call income strategies. So you can use things like ETFs that sell options and stocks for extra income. For example, you can have a model of mixed cover call ETFs. You can have bond ETFs. You can have CLOs. Other fixed income strategies. You can even have real estate income trusts. But the idea is you can have different equities that are mainly focused on creating revenue, whether it's on a quarterly basis, or interest and dividends either on a monthly basis or quarterly basis or even annual basis. But that interest and dividends becomes additional income for you. This can offer higher potential distributions and some growth, but it comes with higher risk. So understand that's the difference between this and annuities, for example. There's likely more limited upside in bull markets and volatility from option strategies. It's one of many approaches weighted based on your risk tolerance and your investment objectives. Here's a general rule. Taxable first, tax deferred, so like traditional strategies. Next, tax-free, Roth, for example, and that's last. But customize. Roth conversions, for example, before RMDs at age 73 in 2026 to fill lower tax brackets. QCD, so qualified charitable donations after 70.5, satisfy RMDs. They're tax-free for a charity. Social Security timing, delay if possible for higher benefits. That's if you plan on retiring later in life. If you plan on retiring earlier, then maybe we don't necessarily do that. But for those that can wait, it's not an urgency to retire now, delaying will potentially get you higher monthly benefits. The other thing to consider is the healthcare bridge. So pre-Medicare gap, for example, for those age 65, it's often expensive. And then longevity insurance. So delay Social Security or deferring annuities. What type of workers' comp do you have, or disability insurance? What do you have? Long-term care, for example. What do you have to address these issues that may arise once you're retired? And finally, estate planning. Make sure you have the right beneficiary designation, trust, wills as needed, that you really designed and selected how do you want to define your legacy and whom and how you want to leave your estate, right? I think a lot of us fail to plan for this because nobody wants to think about this, right? Like, who wants to think about us, the world after us, when we're no longer here? But it's a reality that's going to happen to all of us. No one's exempt for this. So why not plan for this so that you can avoid headaches to your heirs, your beneficiaries, so you can have an airtight plan that's based on your intentions, your wills, and your desires, and providing a peace of mind to your surviving spouse and your beneficiaries. Key takeaway. Advanced planning makes your money last as long as you do. Actions to take this week. Models for your withdrawal rate. Use a calculator to test the 4% withdrawal rate that we discussed or the dynamic strategy. Review your portfolio for sequence risk. Do you have 2 or 3 years in cash buffer? Remember that. The cash buffer, you have a down market, you have an unexpected expenditure, you have an additional 2 to 3 years in expenses in your portfolio so that you can withdraw from there versus your traditional equities are more susceptible to the volatility of the market. And then check your RMD age and consider Roth conversion, the opportunities that come before age 73. All right, next episode, the series finale, we bring a guest expert. They'll recap everything, engage in a conversation on key points, answer common questions, and share real-life retirement stories to inspire. You're not just planning for tomorrow, you're securing for decades of freedom. Your climb is reaching new heights every single day. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in this series finale.
Life is full of choices, but how do all these choices connect? And how do we plan for what matters most? Because when your life goals align with the right financial strategy, you don't just dream, you climb.